All right, Cheltenham went ahead Friday. It didn't go ahead Saturday. Should they have sacrificed Friday for Saturday, Dave Ord?
Under the current rules, they can't they? If your track's fit to race, you've got to race on the day that you're due to. And I spoke to Paddy. He didn't think they would have raced yesterday at Cheltenham had they not done. Anyway, but I certainly think there's an argument that your feature day should be the first day of 2 in deep midwinter. The chances are the frost's around at this time of year. You've raced on the Friday. You've owned up the ground. You're immediately going to make this Saturday in more danger to frost and to the elements. I can see that argument that you maybe switch Saturday, Sunday, make Saturday your big showcase day, and the Friday action switch to the Sunday to try to preserve the track for that day. But I don't think it would have worked on this occasion.
Peter Saville would love that. Saturday, Sunday, not Friday, Saturday. What do you think about that from an owner, a family man, punter's point of view? Would you prefer a Saturday, Sunday set-up in future rather than a Friday, Saturday set-up for some of these big festivals in the winter?
I think it's easy for me to say, maybe if I'm not 9 to 5 every day, to say I prefer the Friday. But I think for the general public, it's better Saturday to Sunday because they're off work, aren't they? But I don't really know about what the jockeys would think about that.
Would they have had it? You don't think they'd have had a shot of getting it on yesterday?
No,
anyway?
I really don't. They work so hard at Cheltenham. All the staff there are incredible to get it on Friday. And yeah, like you could feel how cold it had got riding later in the day on Friday, and it would have taken more than his sheets, I think, to get us racing on Saturday.
And the point is, I was thinking 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, you'd have had absolutely zero chance of getting either of those days on.
Absolutely. It wouldn't have been racing any day, so they've done remarkably well. Nice
feel about the place Friday? Still people turn out, even though it was pretty Baltic?
Yeah, and it's a funny time of year for everyone, isn't it? Coming up to Christmas, you don't get the same crowd there, but yeah, it was still lovely.
Because people are waiting, and then
money.
You hope the floodgates open.
You know what I mean? Everyone's saving a bit of money for Christmas probably, and yeah, they come... New Year's Day is always a big day there.
It'll get a big local crowd as well. That was Cheltenham Friday. Didn't take place on Saturday. Nor did Newcastle, Dave Ord, take place yesterday. Now, this was a strange one.
This was a strange one. Of all the things you were there working away, we got Cheltenham off and Doncaster off, ITV switched to Newcastle. You've got that ready. Go for a cup of coffee at 12:30 to sit down for the afternoon, and suddenly pops up there's an inspection at Newcastle. There was no hint of danger at all throughout the morning to this meeting. Going was changed to standard at about 12 o'clock. No mention again of any inspection. And then it just seems that somebody's gone out onto the track, a trainer or a jockey at some stage said, look, this isn't raceable. And all of a sudden, they've announced this inspection, they'd agreed to move the races back 10 minutes for ITV, the BHA had been involved. They clearly got no wind of this. And they've gone out and inspected, and they've found that underneath the top level of the surface, once it had been opened up, it was frozen. But what was interesting was the clerk of the course disagreed with that assessment. She thought it was raceable. And she was saying that, in their opinion, it was fit to race, but they don't want to race on it, which is fine. And it was just that John Berry tweeted, who walks an all-weather track before racing? He walks a turf track all the time beforehand, but on all-weather surfaces, they trust it's raceable. They wouldn't have thought of walking it in advance. So who was it who first realised this was in threat?
Well, now, of course, everybody will be walking the all-weather, walking the synthetic. That's a strange one. That is a very curious state of events.
It's a very strange... The dominoes that lined up there, there wasn't a hint of it all morning that there was any threat whatsoever to Newcastle, and then within 10 minutes it had gone.
Of course, you get the standard raft of social media commentary. All weather, yeah, right, whatever.
There's nothing gets... Well, the HWPA awards probably get them going more, but an all-weather meeting being abandoned, it's social media fodder, isn't it?
And Paddy, from your point of view, during the course of the winter, we have seen variable going reports or perceptions of ground. Who'd be a clerk of the course?
Yeah, I know. That's such a hard job. Always out there to be shot at a little bit. It's very hard, but they work hard, and yeah, it's good for them at Newcastle because they've done everything, and sometimes the weather it's never known anything like it this winter.
Okay, let's transition to the case of Ronan McNally, who was one of a number of defendants, but very much the central defendant in a whole raft of cases brought against him by the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board this week. There were 10 charges brought. He was found guilty of the majority, and a whole range of interesting charges relating to the running and riding of horses in his yard, including the Real Deal and the Jam Man, two very high-profile horses. Dave, he feels he's been victimised as the small man, and that horses are not run on their merits day in, day out in Ireland as part of getting them handicapped, particularly in maiden hurdle races, and that he's been singled out. How do you feel about that?
I can see the point that horses are run to get handicapped regularly, blah, blah, but these are extreme cases, aren't they? These are Grade 1 horses that got handicap ratings so low originally. And I thought we've seen the working out, the IHRB committee. Sorry, we've seen the conclusion. We haven't seen the working out. That's what we need to see.
We have not seen the written reasons.
We need to see the written reasons because there's some remarkable conclusions that your horses weren't schooled properly through the starting stalls. How do you prove that? I thought it was really interesting that they'd used experienced handicappers who said that they had never seen this level of improvement before. They brought in third parties, seemingly external third parties, to rule on this.
There's been a subsequent statement from the IHRB as well, Darren, which is sort of almost saying that this is a bit of a shot across the bows of everybody in racing as to how they run their horses. Do you see this as a bit of a watershed case, as someone who, as you said earlier in the programme, liked to land a few touches with horses who you knew were worth a little bit more than the handicap marks they were running off?
This case seems as if there's a lot more to it than this. I think it's just not the particular running of these horses. It's like they've been watching this for a while. I don't know, because I'm not, I don't watch Irish racing all the time, but I think, like we spoke about before, in novice hurdles, maiden hurdles, most of them in a novice hurdle, probably only in a runner of 15, 16 runners, probably only 4 of them are really can possibly win. Well, that's just the nature of young horses and them getting educated and coming to the course, because you can't do everything with them at home.
But it's a question of whether the whole culture, I suppose, Paddy, of the game is going to change, of whether people will be censured more for concealing horses' ability levels from the handicapper.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It really is. But like Darren said, in Ireland, you look at a lot of them novice herds, Willie and Gordon, only 3 horses can win. And difficult one.
Is it not the same here? If you have a 16-runner novice hurdle at Newbury, only Henderson's odds-on shot and Paul or Dan's second favourite realistically has any shot.
Yeah,
and the others are strung out, beaten 40, 60, 80, 90 lengths, and there'll be horses winning handicaps in there somewhere down the line, but you're not going to want to finish too close on the one that you know is only 120 horse.
Sometimes you have no choice, that's just the way it is, but yeah.
Okay.
Something I don't get too involved in. Just do my best.
I thought what was interesting, the inside information, which Ronan denies, was for people to back the horses, not lay. And that's the first time I've seen that in a charge. It's usually information that they're laying on the... This was backing to win.
Well, don't get into that subject, because I have a strong opinion on that. As soon as they allowed you to back a horse to lose, that was where all the problems started. You should not be able to lay a horse at all. Should not be allowed. Back him to win, not to lose. Let's just really simplify it. If you stop that, you can only back a horse to win. Think of all the problems that would stop.
But what about every bookmaker?
What do you mean?
Who are laying every horse to lose all the time?
I mean, as an owner and a punter, if you can go in, it'd be very easy, wouldn't it, as an owner? I've never laid a horse in my life.
But you're not allowed to lay your horse to lose.
Correct, but I never would. I just think it's wrong. So you think that culturally, to allow everybody to lay horses has changed the game? Absolutely, I do. Absolutely.
And the flip side of that argument would be that there's an audit trail for ne'er-do-wells, and actually there's less skullduggery in the sport than there was pre the exchanges.
Well, what do you think's simpler? For somebody to know their horse is going to win a race, or know it's going to finish out the first 3?
Well, I would accept that argument. The interesting thing here, as Dave was saying, is that the charge is passing information to back a horse to win.
Yeah.
And that, again, opens up a really interesting grey area as to... You've got a horse that you really fancy on a given day.
Yeah.
I ring you up and say, do you fancy this? And you go, yeah, should run well. I back the horse, you've passed me inside information. Now, most people within the confines of horse racing would think, fine, wouldn't they? But, of course, people outside looking in think, oh, no, that's insider trading. Now, does the whole culture of the sport now shift to the letter of the law?
It's really difficult, like you just said. You could be talking in a pub to somebody. How do you think your horse will run tomorrow? I could say, I think he'll need the run. And then somebody goes off and lays your horse. It's just impossible. What can you do? You have to just say nothing? You're not allowed to be honest about how you think your horse will run? You see how that's really difficult?
I think there's a difference, isn't there, Dave, between passing inside information and passing inside information for reward?
Yes, definitely. And I think most trainers, most owners will have people coming up to them at the table in a pub. How's this all going to be? And most will come up with, hopefully being the first 6. They come up with a bland lie. But there is some people who, look, if I give you a few quid here, let me know when this one's going to win. And I think that's the element that we're getting. I mean, if it's a punishment to telling somebody to back your horse, this is why I want to see the written reasons. Are going to be fascinating, aren't they? When they come out, that's a game changer. If that is the actual charge that they've made and they've made it stick, it'd be the written reasons.
We know so little about the specifics of this case for those reasons that it is very, very hard to understand whether Ronan McNally's case that he's been victimised holds any water, or whether the IHRB have done an extremely good and thorough regulatory job here. It remains to be seen. But however this pans out, it is going to be a watershed case. Because gaming the system in this sport is perhaps something that is more part and parcel of the way the handicapping system works in the UK and Ireland than it is in France, where you've had a lot of horses run, Darren, but this is something that you've turned your back on.
Yeah, I think when I was asked a question at the time, I had horses running in France and the prize money was better. And it is better. And I made the comment, I'm going to run more in France. But the simple fact is, for pure enjoyment, and I don't want to offend anybody in France, but the atmosphere is just nothing like it. It's just not the same. I'll have a runner there, or I did have a runner there, maybe finish second or third. I'll be the only person in the stand shouting for my horse. There's just it's nothing like it is in. I don't know if you agree, Paddy.
It is different when I've ridden in France, and I remember I used to ride a lot for Tom George in France and on Auteuil, and I could literally jump the last and see him in the stand because he was the only one there. And it is totally different.
Yeah, the racing in this country...
Could you hear him shouting?
I could see him anyway.
The atmosphere in the racing in this country is just so much better. It's a great day out. People love the racing. It just doesn't seem... There's just not the same atmosphere there. It's as simple as that. There isn't.
GBR should hire you.
Yeah.
on a hefty retainer.
Well, it's just the truth, you know. It is the truth. I've experienced it, seen it, owned horses there. I own horses here. I wouldn't have any more horses in France, even though the prize money may be slightly better. I can go to Catterick on a Wednesday and the atmosphere's fantastic. Just using that as an example.
Where's the tipping point for you, prize money wise? I mean, how little would you accept? I mean, would you race for no prize money?
Would I race for no prize money? It's a good question. I mean, obviously. So you're saying if I had an horse entered in the Grand National and there was no prize money, yeah, of course, I'd still like to win it.
But what I'm saying is,
well, you asked the question.
Yeah, in the context of the ongoing debate about prize money and how important and how integral it is to the health of the sport and to people's investment, does prize money make any difference to how much money you spend on racehorses?
I think it does, yeah. I think, like I said before, I always look at my horses and how they're doing. So Ashdown Lad has won the Beecher, round about 60 grand to the owner. I sort of think, like I think a lot of owners do, well, that's round about 3 years training fees, which obviously helps. You don't generally get into racing as an owner to make money. You have to, unless you're in a syndicate, obviously. But there has to be some sort of tipping point where you get reason, you can try and cover your training fees at least, surely. So
that's kind of where it is. Do you think that's where most people sit?
It is definitely where most people sit, and I think at whatever grade racing they're looking to cover a chunk of the training fees, be it a month's training fees or wherever it is, that's what they're looking at when they win a race. If you're receiving as a first prize less than a month's training fees, I think sometimes you must walk away thinking, oh, well, I need to win 2 of them this month to break even. There's not many horses win 2 in a month at any level.
And there comes the reason why, let's say, people with lower grade horses need to have a gamble, because if you're running around Wolverhampton for 1,900 quid, you do need to have a few quid on your horse, maybe, to try and cover your training fees.
Okay, let's talk about Cheveley Park and their jumps interest rather than their flat business, and a number of interesting revelations from Richard Thompson from Cheveley Park this week, Dave. So not just about Aplutar, but Allaho and Fernie Hollow and all sorts of other interesting horses.
Yeah, kept us busy. The interview with yourself, there were so many news strands. I mean, Fernie Hollow, clearly sad news, and Willie Mullin said it's a completely fresh injury, it's a new injury, it's not a recurrence of an old one, so he's on the sidelines again, and you do wonder if they'll get back. But what I thought was the most significant news was the Applutard news, that we've been waiting to see what would come to light post Haydock, and Henry's been sort of saying they're hoping they'd find one or two things. There was nothing obvious, and they've now found he was poorly, he was ill when he came back. His blood was clean when he travelled over. He came back with an infection. They've found a reason, and for me that was so reassuring, because you hate to see he'd never run like that before, and you hate to see a superstar be so laboured and tired and such an uncharacteristic run for nothing to come to light. There's alarm bells ringing, or had he had too much, if the hard race somewhere left a mark, whatever. They've now found a reason, right, this is what it was, we can get this right, rebuild. They're talking even of having him back over Christmas, aren't they, and potentially running at Christmas, which would be, having seen him at Haydock, the prospect of seeing him at Christmas I thought was a long shot.
It also struck me that, aren't we grateful to some of the owners? I mean, trainers have an awful lot on their plate for, communicating all the information we needed to know there. Fernie Hollow out for the year, Allaho might have a run before Cheltenham, Applutard's sick rather than lame. For punters, Darren, it's important to have this level of communication.
I think it is, obviously, for the anti-post market, absolutely. I think a lot of people would like to know, but I'm not sure how often that's in the public domain, how the horses are going at home, what the targets are, whether they're actually going to run in a specific race that the bookies are... I mean, a lot of time I look at the anti-post markets and I think it's clear 20 of them horses are never going to run in that race, but yet they're still in the anti-post market. Again, is that right?
No.
Well, that's what happens, I'm afraid.
No, it's clearly not. Yeah. And it's not difficult to go through and work out which ones aren't
exactly.
there. Do you think there's something that... Do you think that is deliberate, or do you think that's just carelessness?
You try to get me shot on this show, I think. I would say deliberate.
OK. Let's move on and talk about Shishkin, who Nicky Henderson, who we're going to talk to in a few moments' time, is now quite keen to step up in distance. So, Paddy, Shishkin for you, if he moves up in distance, is he going to show us what he showed us last year and the year before?
I'm not so sure. That race at Ascot was, he got the knockout blow, but I'm not sure if it's left a mark on him. In the championship, I know there was an issue with there was growing stuff and they found a little problem, but you never felt comfortable watching him in the Tingle Creek. And yes, you can step him up and trip, but Nicky Henderson's a master trainer and I'm sure he'll do everything possible, but for me it'll be a slight worry.
What did you think, Darren?
I think Sandown's a funny course with those three fences close together, and I think if you get one wrong, you tend to get them all wrong. So, and Cheltenham's a different ball game, so I wouldn't be making a decision on that just yet, personally.
And if he wants to go up in distance, do you go all the way up to 3, Dave? Do you think that's the...
That's what his comment was, wasn't it? The immediate aftermath. I mean, at Sandown, he wasn't happy after Fens, was he, Nico de Boinville? He never felt he was in a rhythm or going where he wanted him to go. But Nicky's comment was Denman Chase was floated at Newbury as being a potential Gold Cup. And I was trying to think of horses who could have been... I mean, Corto Star, when he was winning Gold Cups, would have won Champion Chases the same year, wouldn't he? He had that brilliance. And if Shishkin is a 3-miler, who's been dressed up as a 2-miler, but a peak Shishkin going over a trip, not the Shishkin we've seen. Cheltenham, they found a reason for. Sandown was laboured. You need to see something more next time to suggest it was even the trip.
Don't you think, though, Paddy, that we obsess about distances with jumps horses quite a lot? That they're actually a lot more versatile than we think. You could run them over 2, 2.5, 3, 3 1/4. You could mix and match it a lot more than perhaps we've conditioned ourselves to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's
if you wanted to,
because there's so much racing. Whereas years ago, maybe they had to run over 3 miles, and we think we're experts, honestly, all the time. A lot of us in racing, we're not. You think a horse at 2-miler, he might in fact get 3 miles. It's opinions, but it's nothing to say he won't stay at 3 miles.
Speak for yourself. These two are experts. Right. Nicky Henderson coming up.